He left 3 weeks after my cancer diagnosis. I raised our kids alone through chemo. He showed up at graduation with a new wife, so my son handed him back his own check. My son was still in his graduation gown when he did it. Navy blue, polyester, slightly too long. He'd tripped on the hem twice crossing the stage and laughed both times, which is so perfectly him that I had to press my knuckle against my mouth to keep from making a sound in the bleachers. He was 22 years old and 6'1", and he looked like everything I had survived made visible, standing there with his diploma and his ridiculous gown and his whole life arranged neatly in front of him like a table that had finally been set. And then I saw Marcus. He was standing near the gymnasium exit with a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, younger, the careful kind of pretty that takes significant maintenance. And he was holding a small bouquet of white flowers. And he was wearing the blue blazer he used to wear to parent-teacher conferences. And he was smiling like he had earned the right to be in that room. My hands went cold. Not because I still loved him. I want to be clear about that. I had not loved Marcus Hale in a very long time, possibly before I even stopped. What made my hands go cold was the calculation, the specific arithmetic of his presence. He had done the math. He had figured out that enough time had passed, that enough water had gone under enough bridges, that he could show up to his son's graduation with white flowers and a new wife and a blazer, and it would look, from the outside, like a father. He had not considered my son. That was always Marcus's fundamental error. He never considered the children. I had been married to Marcus Hale for 14 years when I found the lump. 14 years, 2 kids, 1 mortgage on a split level in Westerville, Ohio, and the specific domestic sediment that accumulates in a long marriage, the shared streaming passwords, the brand of coffee that is the correct brand and no other, the way you stop fully explaining things because the other person already knows the context, already knows the players, already knows the ending, or you think they do. I was 41. I was a high school English teacher at Jefferson High, the kind who assigned actual books and actually argued about them, and was nominated for Teacher of the Year twice and won it once, which Marcus acknowledged with a card that said, "Proud of you," and an exclamation point that I thought was enthusiasm and later understood was distance. Our kids, Caleb, then 17, sharp and quiet and possessed of the particular moral clarity that some teenagers have before the world talks them out of it, and Lily, then 13, who played competitive soccer and had my mother's stubbornness and her father's ability to walk into a room and immediately become the center of it, a talent she has since redirected toward considerably better uses. Marcus was in pharmaceutical sales. Good at it, the kind of good that comes from being handsome and easy and knowing when to listen and when to talk. He made $140,000 a year and coached Lily's soccer team on Saturdays and volunteered at the church blood drive every January, and from the outside we looked like something solid. The red flags, in retrospect, were there. They're always there. The conference trips that ran longer than conferences typically run. The second phone. Work phone, he said, and I had no reason not to believe him, so I didn't. The slight pulling away that started maybe 2 years before the diagnosis. The way he stopped initiating conversations. The way he stopped being in the room even when he was in the room. I told myself it was stress, career pressure. The difficult year we'd had when Lily broke her ankle and the medical bills stacked up and Caleb was struggling in AP chemistry. I told myself a lot of things. The mammogram results came back on a Thursday in October. Dr. Priya Anand, oncologist at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center, 14 years in breast oncology, sat across from me in her office with the kind of stillness that means she has delivered this news before and knows exactly where it lands. Stage 2, left breast. Caught early enough for good options. Surgery, then chemotherapy, then radiation. She used the word manageable. She said it the way you say it when you mean it, and also when you need the person across from you to not completely fall apart in your office. I did not completely fall apart. I drove home. I sat in the driveway for 11 minutes. Then I went inside and I told Marcus. He said, "Okay, just that. Okay. Not, we'll get through this. Not, tell me what you need. Not even the inadequate, but at least instinctive I love you that the situation was screaming for. Just okay." Like I had told him the dishwasher needed repair. I told myself he was processing. That shock takes different shapes. That I shouldn't interpret silence as indifference when it might just be a man trying to hold himself together. I was wrong about that too. The first loop of it, the first time I noticed something and rationalized it away, was the week after the diagnosis. Marcus started coming home later, not dramatically later, 30 minutes, an hour. Enough to miss dinner, which I was having to force myself to eat anyway, because nausea had set in even before treatment started. Just anxiety nausea, just my body already preparing for the war it knew was coming. I told myself, he doesn't know how to handle this. He loves you. Give him time. The second loop was the weekend I came back from my pre-surgical consultation and found him on the back porch with the second phone. He put it in his pocket when he heard the door. Smooth, practiced, like a man who had done that before. I stood at the sliding glass door and felt something in my stomach that was not nausea. I said, "Who was that?" He said, "Work." I looked at him. He looked at me. Neither of us said the true thing. The third loop was 2 weeks before surgery. I woke at 2:30 a.m. to an empty bed and found him in the kitchen, typed half a message on that second phone that he closed before I got close enough to read. He looked at me and his face did something complicated. Not guilt, exactly. Something more exhausted than guilt. Like a man who had been keeping a secret for so long that the keeping of it had become its own kind of suffering, and he resented me for that too. Can't sleep. sleep, he said. I poured a glass of water and went back to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling and did not sleep at all. The fourth loop happened on a Sunday, 3 days before my surgery date. I was folding laundry in the bedroom, the purely mechanical task you give yourself when your mind is too loud to do anything that requires thought. And Marcus came in and sat on the edge of the bed and said, I can't do this. I put down the shirt I was folding. The surgery is Thursday, I said. You can't do what? This, he gestured. At the room, at me, at the general territory of our shared life. I'm not able to be what you need right now. I don't think I can. Marcus, I've been unhappy, he said, for a long time. I sat down on the floor, not dramatically. My legs just decided they were done participating in the standing portion of the conversation. He talked for a while. I heard pieces of it, grown apart. Not what either of us needs. The kids will be okay. We'll figure out the logistics. I had surgery in 72 hours. I had stage 2 breast cancer. I had a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old asleep down the hall. He was discussing logistics. He moved out on a Tuesday. My surgery was that Thursday. My sister Carol drove me to the hospital. She sat in the waiting room for 6 hours and brought me home and stayed for a week, sleeping on the couch, learning the dishwasher's particular quirk, making sure the kids ate. Marcus sent a card. Thinking of you during this difficult time. That is, verbatim, what it said. I want to tell you what chemotherapy is like, because I think people who haven't been through it have a cinematic version in their heads. The movie version, where you're pale and frail and lying beautifully in bed, and the real version is both worse and more mundane than that. The real version is, you teach on a Tuesday and vomit in the faculty restroom on a Wednesday and grade papers on a Thursday because the papers don't stop needing to be graded just because your cells are being systematically destroyed. The real version is being too exhausted to lift your arms over your head to wash your hair on the days you have hair left to wash. The real version is Caleb, 18 by then, quietly learning to cook pasta because I'd shown him once and he paid attention, setting a bowl in front of me and sitting there while I ate it even though I knew he had homework and he never once made me feel like I was a burden. Not once in 8 months of treatment. The real version is Lily, 14 by then, on the phone with her father one evening. I wasn't listening, or trying not to, and her voice getting very small and very controlled and saying, we need you to come. And Marcus's voice, tinny through the speaker, I'll try to get up there soon, Lil. And Lily hanging up and sitting at the kitchen table and very deliberately pulling her homework toward her and opening it and beginning to do it with the focused intensity of someone who has decided not to feel a thing. I turned back to the dishes. My hands were shaking, not from the chemo, from the specific grief of watching your child learn at 14 that her father is exactly who you feared he was. I want to be fair about one thing. Marcus did send money, not consistently, not reliably, but there were periods when a check would arrive, $2,500 here, $2,000 there, and a note that said things like for the kids or hope this helps. Our divorce attorney, Linda Ferris of Ferris and Cho Family Law in Columbus, 12 years of practice and the particular competence of a woman who has heard every version of this story, told me early on, bank everything he sends, document every gap, and don't assume the inconsistency is over. She was right, as she usually was. What she didn't tell me, couldn't have, was what Caleb was doing with those checks. I didn't know until the graduation. Let me tell you about the legal portion of this, because it matters, and because I want you to understand what going through a divorce while undergoing chemotherapy actually involves in terms of paperwork. Linda Ferris filed for divorce in November, the month after Marcus left. Ohio requires a 90-day waiting period, which meant that I was bald and nauseated and teaching The Great Gatsby to a room of 11th graders, while simultaneously reviewing asset division documents in my car during my lunch break. Marcus had retained his own attorney, Gregory Paulson, also Columbus-based, and the negotiations were the specific kind of tense that happens when one party has more money and the other party has more documentation. I had kept everything, every text, every gap in his schedule I'd noted with a date and time in my iPhone notes, because some part of me, even before the diagnosis, had known I was building a record without knowing why. Every financial statement, the cell records I'd requested, legally during discovery, that showed a number in Pittsburgh called 847 times in 14 months. A number that belonged to a woman named Brenna Cole, who was then 34, and whom Marcus had apparently met at a regional sales conference in 2019 and had maintained an ongoing relationship with while coaching his daughter's soccer team on Saturdays. Our therapist, Dr. James Okonkwo, licensed professional counselor, 17 years in family systems therapy, had suggested couples counseling 8 months before the diagnosis. Marcus had gone twice, and then said he was too busy. I know now that he was already in Pittsburgh on a significant number of those weekends. Dr. Okonkwo, once I was seeing him individually during treatment, said something I've thought about many times since. People who cannot tolerate vulnerability often leave before they can be left. He was afraid of watching you be sick, so he did the thing that felt like control. I appreciated the insight. It didn't change anything, but I appreciated it. Linda Ferris secured child support, $2,100 a month, court-ordered through both children's 18th birthdays. Lily's portion ran through her graduation from high school. Caleb's had ended when he turned 18. After that, nothing. No legal obligation for college, which in Ohio is at the court's discretion, and which Marcus's attorney successfully argued against on the grounds that Marcus was financially extended. He was paying a mortgage in Pittsburgh by then, on a house he shared with Brenna. I made it through treatment. That sentence doesn't carry enough enough weight, so let me try again. I made it through 8 months of chemotherapy, 6 weeks of radiation, a lumpectomy, and 2 additional surgical procedures, while teaching full-time, co-parenting 2 children across a custody arrangement that Marcus honored at approximately 60% reliability, managing a refinanced mortgage on a teacher's salary, and attending every single one of Lily's soccer games and every single one of Caleb's academic competitions, and doing it without a wig once I lost the hair because the wig gave me headaches and I decided that my students could learn to live with the truth of what I looked like. A few of them cried the first day they saw me. I told them that was okay, that being moved by something real is not weakness. They wrote about it in their college essays, some of them. I know because they told me. I made it through. The scan at month 12 was clear. Dr. Annan showed me the images and said, "This is what we hoped for." She's not an emotional woman. She can't afford to be in her work, but she put her hand on my arm for a moment. Just a moment. I went to my car and sat there and let myself feel the thing I'd been not feeling for a year. Then I called Caleb, who was in his first year at Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship, and I said, "I'm clear." He didn't say anything for a second. Then, "Mom," just that. But the whole world was in it. The years between the diagnosis and the graduation are long, and also, in memory, compressed, the way difficult time always is. You live through it in real time, minute by minute, grocery run by grocery run, and then one day you're sitting in a gymnasium watching your youngest child walk across a stage in a rented gown, and somehow 4 years have passed, and you are improbably still here. Lily graduated from Jefferson High, my school, my hallways, in May, 4 years after the diagnosis. She was 17. She had a full athletic scholarship to the University of Cincinnati for soccer. She had her grandmother's stubbornness and her own particular grace, and she had spent 4 years watching me choose to be present for every single moment of hers, and I think that is the thing she will carry. Caleb had driven up from Columbus. He was 22, just finished his master's degree in public policy, starting a position at a nonprofit in the fall. He was sitting next to me in the bleachers when I saw Marcus. I put my hand on Caleb's arm. He had already seen him. His jaw had done a thing, tightened, then released, the conscious act of a man choosing not to react, and he just said quietly, "I know. You don't have to." "I know, Mom." We found Marcus after the ceremony. He found us, actually. Appeared at the edge of the gymnasium floor while Lily was still in a cluster of her friends, and he had the white flowers and the blazer and Brenna slightly behind him, looking uncertain, which was the most sympathetic I could bring myself to feel about her. Marcus looked at me first. Something moved across his face, not guilt exactly, the cousin of guilt. The look of a man who knows what he did and has successfully argued himself into believing it wasn't that bad. "You look well," he said. I looked at him. "Congratulations to Lily," he said. "I'm really proud of her." "She knows that." I said it without sharpness, just factually. He turned to Caleb. Something happened in the space between them, the specific electrical charge of a son who has decided what he thinks of his father and has been waiting, perhaps for years, for the right moment to make it plain. Caleb reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He brought out an envelope, white, letter-sized, slightly worn at the corners in a way that suggested it had been carried for some time. "This is yours," Caleb said. Marcus looked at the envelope, then at Caleb. "What is that?" "Every check you sent after the child support ended. After I turned 18, the ones you sent for college." Marcus went still. "I never cashed them," Caleb said. "I want you to have them back." The gymnasium was loud around us. Families, photographs, the particular joyful chaos of graduation, and in the middle of it, Marcus was standing with an envelope of his own uncashed checks, and his face was doing something I had never seen it do in 14 years of marriage. "Caleb, you sent money," Caleb said, "because it was easier than being there. I get that, but I don't want easier." He pressed the envelope into his father's hand. "And I don't want your money." And then he turned and walked toward his sister, who was coming across the gym floor with her diploma and her gown and her full-ride scholarship and her whole enormous life ahead of her. I did not look at Marcus. I followed my son. There's an epilogue to this because there always is. Marcus called me 3 weeks later. I almost didn't pick up, and then I thought, I've been making decisions about what I can and can't handle for 5 years now, and I can handle this. He said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. He said, I didn't handle it well. Any of it. I know that. I thought about the card he'd sent after my surgery, thinking of you during this difficult time. I thought about Lily's voice on the phone getting very small and very controlled. I thought about Caleb learning to make pasta because I'd shown him once. "I know you know that, Marcus," I said. "The question is whether it changes anything." He didn't have an answer for that. I didn't expect one. We said goodbye, and I hung up and I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, a brand he would not have recognized, because I'd changed every small preference I'd had that was actually his. And I watched the neighborhood do its ordinary Saturday morning things, and I felt, not happiness exactly, but the steadier thing underneath happiness. Wholeness, maybe. The feeling of a life that is entirely, completely, finally mine. Dr. Annan does my scans every 6 months. She says the word clear with the same professional calm every time, and every time I hear it, I feel the same thing I felt in my car the first time, that enormous, silent, cellular relief. Dr. Okonkwo and I still meet twice a month. We've moved from crisis to something that looks more like construction. Linda Ferris sent me a holiday card last December. She signed it, "You were one of my best clients," by which I mean the most prepared. Lily started at Cincinnati in August. She calls on Sundays. The long kind of calls. The kind where you're doing other things while you talk talk. She's reorganizing her dorm room. I'm making dinner. And we just exist together for an hour over the phone, which is its own kind of richness. Caleb took his nonprofit job. He's working in education policy, trying to expand literacy programs in under-resourced schools, which is perhaps the most him thing he could have possibly chosen to do. He calls on Tuesdays. He still makes pasta. He sent me a photo of his version. Upgraded it a little. Don't be offended. And it honestly looked better than mine. I was not offended. I was the opposite of offended. People sometimes ask me, not often, but sometimes, usually women who are in the middle of something hard, how I did it, how you raise 2 kids through cancer treatment and a divorce on a teacher's salary, and come out the other side with children who are, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary human beings. And I want to give them something useful, so I try to be honest. I did it badly, some days. I did it on no sleep, and with shaking hands, and with the very specific dignity of someone who has decided that dignity is the only thing they have complete control over. I did it with my sister Carol on my couch, and Linda Ferris in my corner, and Dr. Annan showing me scan results, and Dr. Okonkwo handing me language for things I didn't have words for. I did it because there were 2 people in that house who were watching how I handled the worst thing that had happened to me. And I understood, not immediately, not gracefully, but eventually, that how I handled it was what I was teaching them. So I showed up, I graded the papers, I attended the games, I sat at the kitchen table and ate the pasta my son made, even on the days I wasn't sure I could keep it down. And I let my daughter watch me lose my hair and go back to work anyway. And I let my son see that you can survive being left, that you can survive being sick, that you can survive a man deciding you are too much to deal with, and that surviving is not the ceiling, it's just the floor. At the graduation, when Lily finally got through the crowd to us, she saw her father standing there with the envelope Caleb had just returned to him. She looked at Marcus, then at the envelope, then at Caleb. She raised an eyebrow. Caleb shrugged, the small shrug that means I'll explain later. Lily looked at her father for one more second, not with anger, not with longing, just with the clear-eyed assessment of a young woman who grew up watching her mother do hard things and took notes. And then she turned to me. She held up her diploma. We did it, she said. We, not I, we. I put my arm around her and I said, yeah, baby, we did. And I meant every single person who had ever sat in a waiting room or answered a phone call at midnight or made a bowl of pasta or pressed a hand to someone's shoulder in a dark moment. Every person except one. He was still standing at the edge of the gymnasium, holding his own uncashed checks, which I think is precisely the weight a man like that deserves to carry. He wanted credit for surviving something he left. My kids handed him back the receipt.